Welcome back to Terran Tales, the home of raw stories, hard truths, and moments that change everything. If stories like this hit close to home, do me a favor right now. Like the video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss what's next. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let me tell you how I learned that love can look solid on the outside and still be built on a lie. I genuinely believed we were solid. 3 years married, no screaming fights, no slammed doors, no dramatic threats of leaving. Just routines, responsibilities, and what I thought was mutual respect. She used to say we were different from other couples, and I wore that like a badge of honor. I thought stability was quiet. I thought love was consistency. When she quit her job, she said she needed time to find herself. Those were her exact words. Find herself. I didn't argue. I didn't complain. I told her it was okay, that I'd handle things for a while. I meant it. At the time, stepping up felt natural, like something a husband should do. So I picked up the slack. All of it. I paid every bill. Rent, utilities, groceries, subscriptions I didn't even use. I cooked most nights because she said she was too mentally drained. I cleaned because it stressed her out to see mess. I worked longer hours and came home tired but proud. Proud that I could provide. Proud that she didn't have to worry. She smiled a lot back then, kissed me on the cheek in passing, thanked me casually like you thank someone for holding a door. It never occurred to me that gratitude without respect is just politeness. From the outside, we looked perfect. Dinner dates, photos, shared jokes. Friends called us goals. Her friends especially loved me, said I was rare, said she was lucky. I believed them. I believed her when she said she loved me. I believed that sacrifice was temporary and partnership was permanent. What I didn't notice, or maybe didn't want to notice, was how easily she settled into being supported. How quickly my effort became expected. How my presence became background noise. I was there, always available, always reliable, like furniture, useful, unquestioned. I thought love meant endurance. I thought loyalty meant patience. I thought if I just kept showing up, everything would balance out eventually. But there's a difference between building together and carrying someone who's already decided they're passing through. I didn't know it yet, but the marriage I thought was stable wasn't built on teamwork. It was built on convenience, on my consistency, on my silence. And the worst part? I wasn't being betrayed in secret. I was being misunderstood out loud. I just hadn't heard it yet. Friday nights were usually quiet for us, predictable, comfortable. That night was supposed to be no different, except it was her monthly girls' night. She'd mentioned it casually that morning, like an afterthought. I told her to have fun and meant it. I always did. By evening, the apartment smelled like food. I cooked one of her favorites, nothing fancy, just something warm and familiar. I plated everything carefully, like presentation still mattered, like effort was still currency. When her friends started arriving, laughter filled the living room almost immediately. The kind that travels, the kind that tells you alcohol has already entered the conversation. I stayed in the kitchen, not because I was told to, just because it felt easier. I served drinks, refilled glasses, cleared plates, smiled when spoken to, nodded along when someone cracked a joke. I was present, but not included. Background music in my own home. At some point, I carried dishes back to the sink and turned on the water. The faucet ran a little louder than usual. I remember thinking I should fix that. Funny how your mind grabs onto small, pointless details when it's trying to avoid something bigger. That's when I heard it. Her voice cut through the laughter, clear, confident, unguarded. Anthony's just my practice husband. At first, my brain didn't register the words. Practice, husband, together. They didn't make sense, like hearing a sentence in a language you almost understand. I stood there, hands in soapy water, waiting for the punchline, waiting for laughter that would tell me this was a joke. But the laughter that followed wasn't surprise. It was agreement. Someone laughed too hard. Someone else said, "Stop, you're terrible." But they were smiling when they said it. Another voice chimed in about how smart she was for not settling too early. Wine glasses clinked. The conversation moved on like nothing important had just been said. My chest tightened. My hands went numb. I turned off the faucet without realizing I had. The kitchen felt smaller, colder, like all the air had been quietly removed. Practice, husband. I replayed it in my head, over and over, hoping I'd misheard, hoping context would rescue me. But context only made it worse. She talked about how I handled bills, how I cooked, how I was great for now, how I wasn't the kind of man she'd end up with long term. She said it casually, comfortably, like she'd said it before. I looked down at the plate in my hand and realized I'd been gripping it too tightly. My fingers were shaking. I set it down slowly, afraid I'd drop it and draw attention. Afraid they'd see me. Afraid I'd hear more. The thing that hurt most wasn't the words. It was how easily they came out of her mouth. Not whispered, not hidden, not regretful, just honest. And in that moment, standing alone in the kitchen while my wife laughed in the next room, I understood something I'd never considered before. I wasn't part of the joke. I was the punchline. I didn't walk into the living room. I didn't confront her. I didn't clear my throat or make my presence known. I stood there in the kitchen, invisible, listening to my marriage be dissected like it wasn't attached to a living person. She kept talking about how I paid all the bills, how I handled things well, how she never had to worry about money or responsibility with me around. The way you talk about a reliable car, useful, functional, temporary. Then came the part that twisted something deep in my chest. She said I wasn't husband material, not the kind of man she'd end up with, not the man she'd really want, just the man who made life easier while she figured things out. Someone safe, someone convenient, someone she could outgrow. Her friends laughed again. One of them said something about how men like me were good starters. Another joked about upgrades. Someone else said, "At least he treats you well," as if that was my only redeeming quality. I felt heat rush to my face. My ears rang softly, like I was underwater. Every sound stretched and distorted. Laughter too loud, glasses clinking too sharp, my own breathing suddenly unfamiliar. I reached for another plate, my fingers slipped. The dish hit the counter first, then the floor. It didn't shatter, just cracked loudly enough to silence the room for half a second. My heart jumped. I stared at the floor like it had betrayed me. Someone asked if everything was okay. I said yes. My voice didn't sound like mine. I bent down to pick up the plate, hands shaking now, and that's when it hit me. Not the insult, not even the disrespect, but the realization that this conversation wasn't new to her. This wasn't a slip. This was how she saw me. The role I played in her life had been defined without my consent, discussed without my knowledge, and laughed about without a shred of guilt. I wasn't her partner. I wasn't her equal. I was a placeholder. I straightened up and looked toward the living room, careful not to be seen. She was relaxed, leaning back, wine glass in hand, smiling like she was exactly where she wanted to be. Comfortable enough to be cruel, secure enough to be honest. That image burned itself into my memory. In that moment, something shifted. Not anger, not yet. It was smaller than that, quieter, a kind of clarity. I realized I'd been trying to earn respect from someone who didn't think I was worth respecting. I'd been proving myself to a person who had already decided my ceiling. I'd been loyal to a version of the relationship that only existed in my head. I carried the rest of the dishes to the sink and washed them slowly, methodically. Each movement felt distant, automatic, like my body was finishing a task my heart had already quit. The laughter started again in the living room, but it sounded different now. It sounded like confirmation. I went to bed early that night, said I was tired. She barely looked up from her phone when she said goodnight. Lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I didn't feel rage. I felt small. And for the first time since we'd been married, I wondered, not if she loved me, but why I'd been trying so hard to be loved by someone who clearly didn't see me as enough. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing, staring into the dark, replaying every word I'd heard in the kitchen. Practice husband, starter, temporary. The words looped in my head until they lost meaning and became something heavier, a weight pressing down on my chest. By morning, I was exhausted but clear. Clear in a way I hadn't been before. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't plotting or planning. I just needed to hear it from her directly. I needed to give her the chance to explain herself, to deny it, to apologize, to show even a trace of regret. She made coffee like nothing had happened, hummed quietly, checked her phone, asked if I wanted a cup. The normalcy felt almost insulting. Later that evening, when the apartment was quiet again, I finally asked her. I kept my voice steady, careful not to sound accurate. Said Tori, "Hey, about what you said last night to your friends." She looked up from the couch, mildly annoyed, like I'd interrupted a thought. "What about it?" I told her exactly what I'd heard. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't editorialize. I just repeated her words back to her, slowly, waiting for the moment where she'd realize how cruel they sounded. It never came. She didn't blink, didn't shift uncomfortably, didn't even try to soften her expression. Instead, she tilted her head slightly and said, "Do you have a problem?" That was it. No apology, no explanation. No, I didn't mean it like that. Just a question that made it clear she didn't think she'd done anything wrong. I felt something drop in my stomach. Not heartbreak, something colder, something final. I asked her if that was really how she saw me, if she truly thought of our marriage as practice. She shrugged like the answer was obvious. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It was just a joke. Everyone jokes like that." I asked her why it was funny. She rolled her eyes. That was the moment I understood. Remorse requires respect. Apologies require accountability. And she felt neither. In her mind, I was reacting poorly to a truth she felt entitled to share. The problem wasn't what she said, it was that I'd heard it. She went back to her phone. Conversation over. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something, anything, a sign that I mattered enough to fight for. It never came. Instead, I noticed how calm she was, how confident, how secure in the assumption that I wasn't going anywhere, that I'd cool off, that I'd swallow it like I always did. And that's when the final illusion shattered. She didn't disrespect me because she hated me. She disrespected me because she didn't fear losing me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't try to make her understand. I just nodded and said, "Okay." She didn't look up. I walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed in silence. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was done explaining myself to someone who had already explained who they were. That night, while she scrolled to her phone in the next room, I made a quiet decision, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. If I was only practice to her, then I was done rehearsing. The weekend passed in a strange, unsettling calm. She acted like nothing had changed, smiled when she spoke to me, asked what I wanted for dinner, talked about a show she wanted us to watch together. If you didn't know any better, you'd think we were fine, happy even. I, on the other hand, felt like I was standing in the center of a storm no one else could see. I didn't argue with her. I didn't bring it up again. Not because it didn't matter, but because it finally mattered enough to stop wasting words. Every interaction felt distant, like I was watching my life through glass. I responded politely. Briefly, I kept my tone neutral. She didn't notice the change, or maybe she did and didn't care. That realization settled heavily in my chest. I spent that weekend thinking, not emotionally, strategically. I replayed the last 3 years with a new lens. The compromises I'd made, the times I'd swallowed discomfort to keep the peace, the way my efforts slowly became expectation, how often I'd convinced myself that patience was the same thing as love. By Sunday night, my decision was firm. Monday morning, I took a half day off work and walked into a lawyer's office. I remember sitting there, hands folded, heart steady, no shaking, no panic, just focus. I told him everything, the marriage, the comments, the dynamic, the prenup. When I mentioned the prenup, his eyebrows lifted slightly, not in surprise, in approval. She had hated that prenup, called it unromantic, said it meant I didn't trust her. I'd agreed to it anyway, quietly, firmly, not because I expected this, but because I believed in protecting what I built. Back then, I thought it was just being practical. Now it felt like foresight. The lawyer walked me through my options. Clean, simple, efficient. No drama unless I wanted it. I didn't. I wanted finality. I wanted control. I wanted peace. As I signed documents and reviewed timelines, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Not joy, not excitement. Relief. That afternoon, I went back to work like nothing was wrong. Sent emails, attended meetings, smiled on camera. No one could tell that my marriage had already ended in my head. That night, she laughed at something on her phone and leaned against me on the couch. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. She didn't notice. Or maybe she assumed she didn't need to. That assumption was her mistake. The storm wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, controlled, intentional. While she relaxed in the comfort of certainty, I was preparing for clarity. While she believed I was still playing my role, I was stepping out of the script entirely. By the time she went to sleep that night, my path was set. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need validation. I had something better, a plan. And plans don't announce themselves, they execute. Saturday morning arrived quietly, no tension, no argument, no dramatic shift in the air. She got dressed for brunch like she always did, casual confidence, light makeup, phone in hand. She told me where she was going, who she'd be with, how long she'd be gone. I nodded, listening the way I always had. She kissed me on the cheek on her way out. It felt automatic. The door closed behind her, and the apartment went silent. I stood there for a moment, not moving, not thinking, just listening to the absence. Then I checked the time. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I'd already planned it down to the minute. I sat at the table and pulled out my phone. First call, the bank. I verified my identity. Calm voice, clear instructions. I canceled the joint credit cards, froze the shared accounts, redirected automatic payments. Each confirmation felt less like revenge and more like reclaiming oxygen. No yelling, no hesitation, just clicks, signatures, security questions. 30 minutes. That's all it took to undo what had taken years to slowly give away. When I finished, I sat back and exhaled. A long, steady breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt grounded. Then the text started. At first, confusion. "Hey, my card isn't working. Did something happen with the bank?" I didn't respond. Then irritation. "Can you check this? This is embarrassing." Still silence. Then panic. "Anthony, answer me. I'm serious. My card was declined. What did you do?" I watched the messages come in without opening them. Each buzz felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. The power dynamic had shifted, and she felt it instantly. For the first time, she was aware of the cord, and that it had been cut. I spent the rest of the morning packing. Only my things, clothes, documents, personal items. I was methodical, careful, respectful, even now. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't take what wasn't mine. I just removed myself. I stacked the boxes neatly in the living room. By the time she got home, everything was ready. She burst through the door, angry, not worried, not apologetic, angry. Her first words weren't concern. "Why are my cards frozen?" I looked at her calmly. I needed to separate things. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. That's when I knew. She hadn't seen me as a partner. She'd seen me as infrastructure. The man who made things work in the background. The safety net she assumed would always be there. And now that it wasn't, she didn't know how to stand. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just watched realization replace entitlement in real time. This wasn't punishment. It was alignment. I wasn't cutting her off. I was cutting myself free. And for the first time since this started, I felt completely, undeniably in control. Certainly. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever given more than you received, or stayed quiet to keep the peace, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more real stories about power, betrayal, and self-respect, subscribe to Terran Tales. Your support keeps these stories coming. Now, here's where reality finally hit. She didn't come home calm. She came home furious. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls, and for the first time since this began, she looked genuinely shaken. Not sad, not reflective, but angry that something she relied on had failed her. Her phone was already in her hand, texts half-typed, voice raised before she'd even taken off her shoes. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Why are my cards frozen?" I didn't flinch. I was standing in the living room beside the boxes, divorce papers neatly stacked in my hand. Everything was already in place. No chaos, no scrambling, just preparation made visible. "I told you," I said calmly. "I'm separating things." Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the boxes for the first time. Clothes, documents, pieces of a life she thought were permanent. "What is this?" she asked, her voice rising. "Are you serious right now?" I nodded. That's when the anger turned sharp. "You can't just do this," she said. "This is my house too." I handed her the papers. Not for long. She froze. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't have words ready. "You're divorcing me?" she asked, disbelief bleeding into her voice. "Yes." No explanation, no speech, just the truth. Her face twisted, not with heartbreak, but with wounded pride. "Because of one stupid joke?" I met her eyes. "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It was honesty." And I listened. Everything about me said, I am present, but untouchable. She tried to make conversation at first, small talk, testing boundaries, seeking a spark of the man she once knew, the one who would bend, forgive, or negotiate. She scoffed, shaking her head, pacing now. "You're overreacting. You're blowing this out of proportion." I let her talk. I'd done enough explaining for one lifetime. She stopped pacing when she saw the line she hadn't expected, the sentence she couldn't argue away. "You've graduated from practice marriage," I said evenly. Her breath caught. That was the moment it landed. Not emotionally, structurally. She saw it then. The boxes, the documents, the calm in my voice. This wasn't a threat. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't an attempt to scare her into apologizing. It was final. Her tone changed. "Anthony, come on." No anger now, just uncertainty. I didn't move. The power had shifted, and she felt it slipping through her fingers. She realized too late that the man she thought would never leave had already made peace with going. She looked at the papers again, then back at me, searching for hesitation. There was none. I wasn't cold, I was finished. And for the first time in that entire marriage, reality wasn't on her side. She panicked almost immediately, not in tears at first, not the quiet, regretful type of panic. No, this was raw, unfiltered chaos, the kind that only hits when someone realizes they've miscalculated completely. She started pacing, voice rising with every step. Her phone vibrated constantly in her hand, ignored. She muttered and argued with herself, her words jumbled between blame, disbelief, and desperation. "I can't believe this," she said, louder now. "You're serious? You can't do this. You can't just take everything." I didn't respond. I stood there, calm, hands folded, boxes stacked neatly behind me, divorce papers in one hand. My presence was steady, immovable. Every inch of the room said the same thing. I had control now. Her eyes darted around the apartment like she was looking for a lifeline, somewhere to negotiate, to bargain, to convince me to back down. But there was none. I had anticipated every move, every reaction, every attempt to manipulate or guilt me, and she was running out of options fast. She sat down suddenly, defeated for a moment, only to spring back up and scream again. "Anthony, please, I'm begging you. You can't. Please, we can fix this. I'll change, I swear." I finally spoke, my voice calm, measured. "I heard the truth from your own lips. I know exactly who you are. This isn't about anger. This is about clarity." Her face went pale, not the dramatic kind of pale, but the hollow, stunned kind. She blinked rapidly, realizing that the cards she had tried to hold close were now revealed. I walked slowly toward the table and slid the prenup across it. Her reaction was instantaneous, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like she was trying to breathe through a nightmare. The papers weren't just documents, they were proof. Proof that everything she assumed about control, entitlement, and safety nets had been dismantled with precision. She backed up against the wall, staring at the prenup like it was something alive, a mirror reflecting every misstep, every careless word, every laugh at my expense. She had gambled with someone who had foresight, someone who kept receipts. Her panic turned into desperate pleading. "Please, please, Anthony, don't do this. I'll just name it. Anything. I'll pay. I'll leave. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to comfort or argue. I simply watched her unravel. Each word, each frantic gesture reinforced what I already knew. Her confidence had been built on the illusion of control. That illusion was gone. Silence eventually fell. Heavy, complete. She slumped onto the couch, still staring at the prenup as if staring harder could erase reality. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The room smelled faintly of coffee and tension. The air itself seemed to settle, finally recognizing the end of a long, drawn-out deception. I stayed standing, calm, collected, observing the quiet storm I had allowed to unfold. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about truth. And now, the truth had landed. For the first time, she understood that words could no longer protect her, that laughter could no longer shield her, and that I was no longer an option. I gave her 2 hours. Not 2 hours of arguing, not 2 hours of negotiating. 2 hours to gather what she wanted, pack her things, and leave. Enough time to process that the power she assumed she held was gone. 2 hours to face the reality that she had misjudged someone she thought would never leave. She started slow, carefully, tentatively, moving boxes from bedroom to living room, slipping clothes into suitcases, zipping them shut like each fold of fabric might hold back the consequences. Her movements were deliberate, but there was panic in her eyes, a quiet urgency I hadn't seen before. I watched from the couch, calm, collected, Everything about me said, I am present, but untouchable. She tried to make conversation at first, small talk, testing boundaries, seeking a spark of the man she once knew, the one who would bend, forgive, or negotiate. But that man didn't exist anymore. Do you really have to do this? She asked, voice trembling. Can't we talk? I shook my head. This is not a negotiation. This is reality. She froze mid-step, suitcase half-zipped. Then she hurried to the bedroom, grabbed a few more items, then paused at the doorway. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Something had shifted in her expression. The arrogance, the entitlement, the casual dismissiveness, all replaced by confusion and fear. Anthony, please, she whispered. I didn't think. I didn't respond. Silence was the answer she needed to hear. Silence that carried the weight of truth she had ignored for years. She moved faster then, packing with a frantic energy, shoving belongings into bags, throwing clothes over her shoulder, cramming shoes into boxes. Every action screamed panic. Every glance toward me was a plea I could no longer grant. 30 minutes in, she stopped and leaned against the doorframe. Her shoulders were slumped, hands gripping the handle of her suitcase like a lifeline. She wanted something. Apology? Forgiveness? Validation? Power? Control? All gone. The remaining hour passed like this, quiet, tense, purposeful. She moved in controlled bursts. I moved not at all, watching, waiting. And then it was time. She walked out slowly, suitcase in hand, the weight of realization heavy in her steps. The door clicked shut behind her. Not slammed, not dramatic, just final. A punctuation mark on years of unspoken truths, unearned loyalty, and misplaced effort. I exhaled, a long, steady release. Calmness replaced tension. Relief replaced pain. For the first time in what felt like forever, the apartment felt like mine. Not shared, not burdened, not conditional, just mine. I walked to the window, watching her car disappear down the street. Her figure shrank in the distance, but the impact of what had just happened stayed large in my mind. Everything she had assumed about me, about us, about control, gone. And yet there was no gloating, no triumphal satisfaction, only quiet acknowledgement. I had done what I needed to do. I had drawn the line. I had protected myself. She gambled with someone she thought was permanent. She lost. And now, for the first time in years, I felt free. She called me her practice husband. That phrase haunted me for weeks. At first, it felt like an insult, a label meant to diminish everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed. But as the dust settled, I realized it was a gift in disguise. Because in calling me practice, she had unknowingly revealed the truth. I had been playing a real role in a one-sided story. The practice husband had no say, no respect, no future. I did. And now the roles had reversed. The practice divorce wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming what was mine. My dignity, my peace, my future. I learned something profound through it all. Love isn't measured by effort alone. It isn't about giving until it hurts, or sacrificing endlessly in hopes of being acknowledged. Real love respects, values, and honors both people. Anything less is temporary. Anything less is practice. Sitting alone in my apartment that evening, I didn't feel emptiness. I felt clarity. I felt relief. I felt strength. The silence wasn't heavy. It was liberating. The space around me was calm because the storm had passed, and I was standing, intact, unbroken, and finally free. She had her practice marriage. I gave her her practice divorce. And in the end, the difference was clear. Mine was real, and it was final. If this story hit you hard, take a moment right now to like this video, Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Taryn Tales for more real, unfiltered stories. Comment below. Which part touched you the most? What kind of stories do you want to see next? We want to hear from you. Your support keeps these tales alive, and we've only just begun. Stay tuned because the next story could change the way you see the world.